Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm gemini-tkd-sam and I'm here to tell you that you have no friends. Booyah! Yeah, you heard that correct. You have no friends. I'm not your friend. You're not my friend. As a matter of fact, even I don't have friends. Sounds nihilistic? Yeah, I appreciate, but let me explain. Okay, so this is going to go off topic from martial arts. Who the fuck cares? We're going to talk a little bit about psychology today. So we're going to talk about the concept of friendship. And does such a thing as a real friend even exist? No, is the quick answer to that. Okay, now you know the answer, you can just go away. But if you want to hear some elaboration, then yeah, stick around. So, friendship. Let's start off actually with how would one define a friend? And indeed, as my work as a therapist, actually, I did ask a client once, let's call this client Bob for the sake of confidentiality. They came to me and they said that they felt some dissonance with their friend group at the time. And I remember actually listening to Bob. I heard what they said, I processed what they told me about their friends at the time in this particular situation. And after Bob stopped speaking, I asked Bob a question, which was, how would you define friendship? And I could see Bob went to speak, but then he stopped, and I could see almost like the cog was going in his head, because he was clearly thinking in his head, actually, what is a friend? So we could always start with what is a friend, and I believe what defines a friend is transient, and it changes over time. Think back to when you were at school. The friends that you had at school, friends inverted commas that you had at school, I can guarantee are not going to be the friends that you have now. Or if you still have those school friends with you now, there's not many of them. They're probably like very, very close-knit that you made very specific connections with from an early age, and they've transitioned over now into adulthood. However, most people I feel would say that actually the friends that they had at school are not in their lives today. That is certainly the case with me. I am quite an introverted individual. I'm very select with who I let through my door. So my situation I'd see is quite unique. Not for better, not for worse, but to me, I have a very, very specific personalised view of what makes a friend. But for many people, who they have as friends when they're kids changes over time, and that's when the transience comes in. People's needs change. What people who you used to hang around with when you were a kid fulfilled an unmet need at that time, and that need has somewhere along the lines been met, so you no longer have any use of those friends, and then you develop new friends down the line. But I suppose it could be argued, actually, what I have said, there's no such thing as a true friend. On the surface, that sounds very nihilistic. It certainly could come across as quite dark, quite maybe morose. Certainly, if you want to start using descriptive words, maybe quite even arrogant, I suppose, as well. And I can understand why. I can understand why people would say the statement, there's no such thing as a real friend, can come across as quite negative. So for that purpose, I'd like to break it down and explain. I feel human beings, by their nature, are quite selfish in and of themselves, and that's, we need to be selfish as part of our evolutionary genome, and that's how we got to where we are today, as the top of the food chain. And I'm not advocating for that. I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying that is what it is. A pig is a pig, and that is that. And that is how we got to the top of the food chain, was by being selfish. How we got selfish is that we abused other species. When we were in the Stone Age times, we used to go around hunting woolly mammoth, we used to go around hunting saber-toothed tiger, because we perceived those species as being the threat to our species. So we recognised from an early stage, let's get rid of those species to ensure the survival of our own. And to do that, we had to use friends or colleagues. You couldn't go and hunt a saber-toothed tiger by yourself, because if you put like one man against a saber-toothed tiger in its prime, guess what? A saber-toothed tiger's going to fucking rip your head off. Woolly mammoth's just going to stamp on you. So you could only do that by using friends, colleagues, your tribe. You used to get into groups, like humans are quite sociable, we're social animals, so we make cohesive groups. But those groups are made not because we necessarily like the people that we're working with. We're using those people to fulfill a means. We're using them as a means to an end. They're not necessarily an end in themselves. So from Stone Age times, we got into groups because we knew that we had the better chance of surviving as a cohesive group working for a common goal. People who went off by themselves quite often would get killed. Fast forward a few centuries into like the Middle Ages, a common punishment in medieval England, my country, is or was banishment or exile. And that's where somebody had committed a crime, and instead of being killed or hung, drawn and quartered, which was a common punishment in medieval England, the perpetrator was exiled. So they were literally kicked out of the town. Quite often they were just given like some basic food, some basic supplies. They were kicked out to fend for themselves, and they had to quite often go and live in the woods, where they would try to make a living as an outlaw and try and live off the land. It's not it certainly wasn't a desirable way to live, and survival rate was, well, death in the wilderness was very, very high. You either succumb to the elements or you succumb to the animals. But point being is that people kicked you out of that group, and then you realised actually that you needed that group to survive. You could then fast forward as well into modern life, you know, into the world of work. Would you say that your work colleagues are your friends? Do you have some genuine care and consideration on a personal level towards your colleagues? And sure, let's be honest, you will have some work colleagues who you get on better with than others. And sometimes you can develop affections for other work colleagues, and not necessarily in a romantic sense, though a lot of people who do make their partners, admittedly in this day and age, are either from online dating or they're from work. How often have you met a friend who has a new partner and you say, oh, how did you guys meet? And they'd say, oh, through work. And that's quite common these days. So I'm not saying that you cannot develop affection, not even on a romantic scale, but just like a companionable affection for a work colleague. You can, and that can and does happen. However, for the most part, and coming from a health and social care background myself, I remember my training when I first got into the line of work was all about professionalism, and one of the questions I was constantly asked at interviews and drilled in during trainings was, how would you maintain professionalism? And we were always drilled to believe or feel that actually who you're working with are not your friends. You could be working in a unit, one of your colleagues you could get very, very friendly with, and you go out drinking and you go out socialising and going around their houses for dinner. And then the next day at work, you're pulled into your office and said, yeah, that individual has been suspended, pending investigation for gross misconduct. We would like you to give evidence against them in the disciplinary procedure. Now, if you're their friend, how difficult are you going to find that? And indeed, I've been in a situation where I worked at a place, pardon me, I worked at a place actually where a former partner of mine was suspended. And I still had to work at this place, and I was told that obviously my partner had been suspended. She was at home, so she told me she'd been suspended. And I found that very, very difficult because I had to work with people who I didn't know. Some of them had actually filed a complaint against my ex-partner. And I didn't know who these people were. So I felt a bit of a siege mentality coming in when I was at work, thinking, I'm working with people who've spoken out against my partner, who I'm intimate with, and yet I'm still expected to work with you, be friendly, not be a friend, but be friendly with you, be civil, be cordial, work together for a common goal. And I found that very difficult. So that being said, work colleagues are not your friends. You are there ultimately to do a job. And your colleagues are there to help you do the job, and you're there to help them do their job. And the goal of your job should be a goal that all the co-workers are working towards. That is the common goal. That is the unifying factor that you all have in common. Work towards this goal, but you can only get to that goal if you work together. But that in no way means that you're friends. Looking in cases of, say, wars, like World War II, would you say that the Western allies, who had a much better political and cultural relationship with, say for instance Britain and the United States, have a shared culture for the most part. We have a shared history for the most part. Our other main ally, we had lots of allies, but our other main ally was the Soviet Union. Now the Soviet Union was different to America and Britain on a number of variables. The language, whereas America and Britain shared English as a common language, the Russians or the Soviets didn't. They spoke, for the most part, Russian. The culture was different. The outlook was different. So, did the British and Americans, who may have regarded each other as friends, did they necessarily regard the Soviets as friends? Or was there still a little bit of suspicion? And what happened at the end of World War II, if you know your history? The Soviets and the Western allies actually became adversaries due to a build-up of suspicion and difference in political ideologies, difference in cultural ideologies and outlooks on life. I personally certainly wouldn't have said that Churchill or Roosevelt would have regarded the Soviets as friends in the strictest sense. They would have seen them as allies. They would have worked with the Soviet Union, which we did. Friends, that would have been pushing the boat out quite a bit. Likewise with the Axis and the Japanese, like the Germans and the Japanese. There is evidence to suggest that they worked together. I believe actually that the Germans actually did send some of their warplanes over to Japan. I wouldn't have said that they actually were friends, and actually I believe there was actually quite a bit of animosity between the two of them. Even though they're working together, that doesn't mean that they actually necessarily liked each other on a personal level. So taking away from war and going back into today's day and age, think of somebody in your life who you consider a friend. And I'm going to say something which is going to sound very blunt, but they are not your friend. What is happening is that they are using you. And likewise, for your part, you are using them. Let me explain. You're using each other to get something. Think about the times when you go out with your friends on a night on the town and you're using your friends for lifts. Oh, you know, hi mate, I can't get there. Can you come pick me up and give me a lift? You're using them. Not in a malicious way. And I believe in this day and age when people say you're a user, it does carry a negative connotation. I don't mean it negatively in this way, but you are using them as a means to an end. You go to pay for a drink, you realise actually you don't have the money, so you turn to your friend, oh, you know, would you mind giving me some cash so I can buy this drink? You're using them. You're using a friend as well. Say you have house repairs to do and, I don't know, you need to fix your toilet for the sake of conversation, but you don't have the skills to do that, but you have a friend who's a plumber. So you call up Bob the plumber. Oh, Bob, can you come around and have a look at my toilet, please? Thanks. They come around, have a look, see what they can do. You're using them, you're using their skills, you're using their abilities and their qualifications and experiences to come and help your situation. You're using them. And people could say, okay, well, what if I do go out on a night in the town with my friend? Or what if I want to go on a date with a really drop-dead gorgeous woman or a good-looking guy, and I'm offering to pay for the meals, I'm offering to pay for the cinema tickets, I'm going to pick them up. I'm not using them. I'm giving to them. Yeah, materially. But emotionally, you're still using them. Why would you want to go out with somebody? Whether it's romantic or otherwise. Why would you want to go out with somebody? Why would you want to go out for a drink with somebody? Why would you want to go and see a film with somebody? Why would you want to go out on a day trip with somebody? Why would you want to go on a romantic weekend getaway? There may not be anything anything materially. There may not be anything materially to get from that, but you're getting something emotionally. Being with that person brings you a sense of emotional fulfillment. So you are still using that person on an emotional level to fulfill your own emotional unmet needs. So essentially, you as a friend are using them. And like I said, let's tone down the negativity. you using them is not negative. You're not doing it maliciously. You're not using them and then just like kicking them to the curb. And likewise, they're probably not doing that to you either. But essentially what you're doing, having a friend, you're using them to fulfill an unmet need of your own, whether it's material or emotional. And you can think about any friend that you have in life or have had in life, and you can bet your bottom dollar, whenever you had discourse with them, whenever you had an interaction with them, it's been to get something, material or emotional or otherwise. It's always been to get something, or they have engaged with you in order to get something. Ultimately, the point being, you're always going to get something from someone. You're draining one resource from someplace into your own. So, next time a friend comes up to you and asks to go for a drink or to spend some time, I encourage you to look them in the eyes and say, why would you like to go for a drink with me? Why would you ask that favour of me? What is it about me that you need in this specific situation? And just monitor their reply and see what they say. You can even go on further and say, are you using me at all? And I guarantee you'll probably get an answer of like, oh, good God, no. But you'll see the beads of sweat appear on their forehead because they know that you have them sussed. Now you're a little bit more clued up and a bit more wised up about what friends are. You're probably going to look at friends in a completely different way now. Anyway, stay safe, train hard, keep listening to Deftones because they're the best band around, and I'll see you all in the next video. Boo effing ya.
I don't want to step